I fell in love with the person who raised me, and I didn't even know it until it was too late. What if the one person you trusted, the one who nurtured you, becomes the one you can't live without? What if this person was never supposed to be more than a mother figure, but over time, everything changes? This isn't a story about love at first sight. It's about a bond that was never meant to exist. A bond that, over the years, turned into something deeper, something darker. At the age of 13, I lost my mother. And when she died, I didn't just lose a mother. I lost the only version of love I knew. That's when she stepped in. My father's new wife. A woman who I knew nothing about. A stranger. But somehow, she became everything. She was there for every sleepless night, every tear, every uncertain step I took into adolescence. But over time, something changed. Something I didn't understand. Something I couldn't control. By the time I was 16, I began to feel something more than gratitude. More than just affection. It was something dangerous. Something that twisted the line between family and something darker. But I didn't know how to stop it. And now, I'm left with a question I can't escape. How far does love go when the lines of right and wrong are blurred? What happens when the bond you share becomes something you can't deny? When love no longer feels like love, but something forbidden, something unspoken. This is just the beginning. Stay tuned. I remember the first time I really noticed her. Not as my father's wife, but as someone who made my pulse race, as someone who wasn't supposed to have that effect on me. It wasn't some grand moment. It wasn't a confession or a dramatic scene. It was something small, something so insignificant at the time that I didn't even realize what it meant until much later. It happened one evening when I was 16. The rain was pounding outside, and the wind howled against the windows. I sat in the living room, trying to focus on my homework, but my mind kept drifting. It always did when she was around. She was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. It was a sound I had grown used to, a sound that, for some reason, made me feel calm, safe. I walked into the kitchen to grab a drink, trying to ignore the electric buzz that seemed to vibrate between us whenever we were in the same room. As I reached for the fridge door, she turned to look at me. Her eyes met mine, and for a split second, I saw something there. It was subtle, but it was there. Something more than just the caring look of a mother figure. I froze. She blinked, and her lips curled into a gentle smile. But it wasn't the same as before. It wasn't just the smile of someone who cared for me like a son. There was something else. Something that made my chest tighten. Something that made me want to move closer, despite every rational thought telling me not to. I turned quickly, grabbed the glass of water, and walked back to my room, my heart pounding. That moment lasted less than a few seconds, but it haunted me. From that point on, I began to see her differently. At night, when I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was a betrayal of everything I had been taught about family. But my feelings weren't something I could just switch off. I would find excuses to spend more time with her. Just a little while longer, just enough to hear her voice, to feel the warmth of her presence. Her laugh became a sweet melody, and I caught myself longing to be around her just a little more than I should have. But it wasn't just me. I could feel it in the air between us. There were moments when she would glance at me, and I would catch her quickly looking away, her face flushing ever so slightly. It was as if we were both aware of something unspoken, something forbidden, but neither of us knew how to address it. There was one evening, not long after that first moment in the kitchen, when I realized she knew. Not just in some distant, intellectual way, but on a deeper level. It was late. My father was out on a business trip, and it was just the two of us at home. I sat at the kitchen table, my head buried in a book, trying to focus on anything other than her. I could hear the soft clinking of plates as she set the table, the rustling of her apron, the familiar, comforting sounds. But tonight, it all felt different. She was closer to me than usual. I could smell the faint scent of her perfume, a delicate floral fragrance that clung to the air and wrapped around me like a blanket. "Do you need help with that?" she asked, her voice soft, but somehow laced with something that made my skin prickle. I looked up, meeting her gaze. There it was again. That look. That same lingering look from the kitchen, but stronger now, more evident. She didn't look away. Instead, she held my gaze, her lips parted just slightly. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was thick with something unspoken, something heavy. And then, without a word, she turned away and went to the sink. I couldn't help but watch her, my heart racing in my chest. I knew I shouldn't be feeling this way. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. My feelings were a storm inside me, tearing at my insides, demanding to be acknowledged. But I wasn't sure if I could live with the consequences of what I was starting to feel. It wasn't just physical. It wasn't about attraction, not entirely. It was a pull that I couldn't explain. The kind of pull that made me crave her touch, her attention, her presence. I wanted to be close to her, not just as a son, but as someone else. Someone who shouldn't exist. The more I tried to push it down, the stronger it became. It was as if something inside me was being awakened, something that shouldn't have been allowed to exist. That night, after dinner, I sat in my room, my mind spinning. I felt like I was suffocating, like I was trapped between two worlds. I wanted her, but I knew that wanting her was something that would destroy us both. It was an impossible situation, a paradox I couldn't solve. I tried to tell myself it was just a phase, that it was just me being confused, being too young to understand what I was feeling. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't a phase. It wasn't something that would go away with time. This was something real. And the more I tried to suppress it, the more it grew. I began to see signs of it in her too. She was different around me now. She was more cautious, more careful in the way she spoke, in the way she touched me. Every smile, every laugh, every casual touch felt loaded with something else, something I couldn't define. But neither of us dared to acknowledge it. We both lived in the same house, in the same space, but we were growing further apart, even as we were drawn closer together. That's when I started to wonder, was she feeling the same things I was? Or was I just imagining it? And if she was, what were we going to do about it? Because the truth was, neither of us could stop what was happening. It was already too late. And in that silence, we both knew it. What happens when two people realize they've crossed a line, but neither of them knows how to go back? What happens when love is no longer just love, but something much more dangerous? I didn't have the answers. I just knew that everything was about to change. I couldn't escape it anymore. The pull between us was undeniable, and every day it grew harder to ignore. I could feel it in the air when we were in the same room, in the silence that hung between us when we spoke. It was like we were both holding our breath, waiting for something to happen, but neither of us knew how to make the first move. It was the little things, the way her gaze lingered on me just a moment too long, the subtle shifts in her voice when she said my name, sometimes soft, other times with a faint edge of hesitation, as if she was trying to suppress something, but couldn't entirely hide it. And then there were the touches, casual at first, but now they seemed to happen more frequently. A hand on my shoulder when she passed by, a brush of her fingers against mine when handing me something. These small moments should have been nothing, but to me, they felt like electric shocks running through my skin, each one sparking a fire I couldn't extinguish. I tried to keep my distance. I tried to bury the thoughts, to keep myself busy, to focus on school, friends, anything that would distract me from this mounting tension. But it didn't work. Every time I saw her, my mind wandered, and those feelings I tried to suppress resurfaced with a vengeance. One evening, I couldn't stand it anymore. My father was out of town again, and the house was quieter than usual. She was in the living room, reading a book by the lamp, her silhouette bathed in the soft glow. I could hear the sound of the pages turning, a peaceful, familiar sound that should have brought comfort, but instead, it made my heart race. I couldn't stay away. I told myself I'd just check in, just say something casual. But the moment I stepped into the room, everything changed. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine, and for a moment, the world stopped. We just stood there, the air thick between us, the silence loud and oppressive. Her face softened, almost unreadable, as she closed the book in her hands and set it aside. "You're still up?" she asked, her voice soft, but there was something beneath it, something deeper, something I couldn't name. I nodded, unable to find words. I wasn't sure why I'd come in, or why I couldn't leave. There was something magnetic about the way she looked at me, something that made me feel like I was being drawn in, helplessly. "You should get some rest," she added, but her words felt like an invitation. It was like she was giving me permission to stay, to remain in the space with her, to linger in that tension. I didn't leave. Instead, I sat down on the couch across from her, close enough to feel her presence, but not close enough to make things worse. I felt my heart thudding in my chest, and I knew she could hear it too. The air between us seemed to crackle, the unspoken words building up inside me, clawing at my throat, desperate to be released. She said nothing for a long time, just watching me, her eyes dark and unreadable. I wanted to say something, to apologize for whatever it was that had shifted between us, but I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. Instead, I just sat there, my hands clenched in my lap, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't control. Then, without warning, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you thinking about?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't have an answer, not one I could give her. But the truth was, I wasn't thinking about anything other than her. I wasn't thinking about the consequences or the lines that I knew I shouldn't cross. All I could think about was the way she made me feel, the way her presence seemed to fill every empty space inside me. The desire, the longing, the hunger that had been growing inside me for so long. It was all consuming. I don't know," I muttered, my voice shaky, betraying me. Her gaze never wavered. She didn't press me further, but there was an understanding in her eyes, a recognition of the same things I felt. She didn't move closer, but I could feel her, just as close as if she had. The distance between us had never felt smaller, and yet, I knew that crossing that line would be the end of everything. And then it happened. Without even thinking, I moved closer to her, my body acting on instinct rather than reason. The space between us vanished in an instant, and before I knew it, I was sitting right next to her, so close I could feel the heat radiating off her skin. She didn't pull away. She didn't stop me, and that moment, that fleeting moment, felt like everything I had ever wanted, like a forbidden dream that had finally become reality. But it wasn't right. I knew that. I knew it with every fiber of my being. But at that moment, I didn't care. The lines between us had blurred, and in that fragile moment, I gave in. I let the desire overwhelm me, let the need for her take control. I reached out, my hand trembling, and touched her arm. She didn't recoil. She didn't flinch. Instead, she looked at me with those same eyes that seemed to be asking silently if I was ready for what would come next. I was, or at least I thought I was. But the truth was, neither of us was prepared for what would happen when the dam finally broke. The moment I touched her, the moment we crossed that line, I knew there was no going back. We had just sealed our fates, both of us trapped in a web of desire, guilt, and secrets that neither of us could untangle. As I sat there, my fingers still lightly grazing her skin, I knew that this was the point of no return. Whatever came next, whatever happened after that night, would change everything. And in that moment, all I could think was, how did we get here? The days that followed felt like a blur, a haze of guilt and longing wrapped up in a whirlwind of confusion. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore, and neither could she look at me. The once familiar routine of our lives now felt like a trap we both walked into knowingly, yet neither of us could find the strength to turn back. It wasn't like the stories I had heard. It wasn't a passionate love affair where both people were willingly caught in the moment. No, it was something darker, something that wrapped around me like chains, binding me in a way I couldn't explain. I couldn't control what I was feeling, and I couldn't stop it. After that night, there was an uncomfortable silence between us. Every time I saw her, my heart would race, my palms would sweat, and my mind would swirl with the memory of the closeness, the heat, the brief touch that had started it all. But nothing was spoken. Nothing was said. We both kept our distance, too scared to confront the truth that lay between us. But truth has a way of making itself known, no matter how much we try to bury it. And one night it came to a head. My father had gone on another business trip, and this time it was just her and me at home. The house felt eerily empty without him. There was an odd tension in the air, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. She was in the kitchen again, preparing dinner. I could smell the food, but it felt like the scent was suffocating me. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't even sure what I wanted anymore. I walked into the kitchen, as if some force beyond my control was pulling me toward her. She didn't turn around immediately, but I could hear her breathe in sharply, as if she had been expecting me. I stood in the doorway, not knowing what to say. I couldn't look her in the eye. I should have stayed in my room, I muttered, but my voice was too quiet, too hollow. She turned to face me then, and for the first time since that night, her gaze didn't waver. There was something in her eyes, a mix of fear and something else, something I couldn't name. She seemed unsure, like she was fighting against something that had already been set in motion. "I think it's time we talk," she said, her voice soft but firm. It wasn't a question. It was a command, like she knew that whatever happened next would change everything. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "I don't know what to say." She walked toward me, slowly, deliberately. I could feel her presence like a weight pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. I wanted to step back, to run, to escape the suffocating air between us, but I didn't. Instead, I stayed there, frozen in place, waiting for whatever came next. "I know what you're feeling," she said, her words barely above a whisper. She didn't touch me, but it felt like she was already reaching out, her gaze searching mine for something. An apology, an explanation, maybe even an excuse. "You can't," I whispered, shaking my head. "You don't know. You don't know what this feels like." She sighed, as though everything was finally catching up to her. She reached out, her fingers brushing lightly against my arm, and I couldn't stop myself from flinching. I wasn't sure if it was because I didn't want her to touch me, or if it was because I desperately needed her to. "I've been where you are," she said. "I know what it's like to feel this way, but this—" She trailed off, as if the weight of her words was too much for her to bear. "This can't happen. It's wrong. It can't be." Her admission hit me like a brick wall. It was everything I had been afraid of hearing, yet part of me had hoped she would say it, hoped that she would pull us back from the edge. But the truth, the harsh reality, was staring me in the face now. "We can't go back," I said, my voice trembling. I didn't even know if I was talking to her or to myself. "We've already crossed the line. It's too late." I could see her lips tremble as she tried to hold back tears, but she wouldn't let them fall. "I never wanted this to happen," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you, but now everything is broken. We've broken something we can't fix." I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. How could I apologize for something that was beyond apology? How could I undo the damage we had already done to ourselves? The guilt and shame were suffocating, but I couldn't stop what had already happened. She stepped back, shaking her head as though she was trying to shake off the weight of her own emotions. "You need to leave. You need to go back to your room and think about this. You need to think about what you're doing, what you're feeling, because this can't go on." Her words were like a dagger, cutting deep into me, and yet, I knew she was right. She was right. This was wrong. We were wrong. But I couldn't walk away. I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave her alone in this, because the truth was, I needed her just as much as she needed me. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I don't know how to stop." "I don't either," she whispered back, her voice full of pain. "But we have to. We have to stop, before it's too late." We stood there in the kitchen, both of us broken in ways we couldn't fix. And in that moment, the silence between us spoke louder than any words could have. We both knew what had happened, what we had done. And we both knew that there was no turning back. The silence that followed felt suffocating. It was as though the very air in the house had shifted, becoming thick with unspoken truths. We had crossed a line. There was no going back, no unringing the bell that had already been sounded. But now, as I stood there, my chest aching with guilt and longing, I realized the hardest part wasn't crossing the line. It was living with the consequences of doing so. That night, I lay in my bed, staring up at the ceiling, my mind spinning. I couldn't escape the image of her face, the softness in her eyes, the tremor in her voice when she spoke, the quiet pain that had flashed across her features. I had never seen her so vulnerable, so broken, and it hurt. It hurt in a way I couldn't explain. I wanted to go to her. I wanted to hold her, to tell her that I was sorry, that I never meant for any of this to happen. But I knew better. No amount of apologies would fix what we had done. I thought back to that night in the kitchen when I reached for her, when I had crossed that unspoken boundary, and the way she had responded not with rejection, but with acceptance, even if it was hesitant, even if it was filled with regret. I had wanted her, and she had wanted me too. But desire was never supposed to be part of this. She was my mother's replacement. She wasn't supposed to be this woman I felt so drawn to. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I couldn't help but wonder, did she feel it too? Was she just as torn as I was? The next few days passed in a haze. She avoided me. She kept her distance, always busy with something. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't bear the coldness between us, the space that had grown like a chasm in the middle of the house, separating us. She didn't look at me the way she used to, with the same tenderness. Now she seemed scared. Or was it shame? Couldn't tell. I tried to keep my distance too, but it was harder than I ever imagined. Every time I passed her, I felt that unbearable pull, the urge to touch her, to speak to her, to erase the distance between us. But I knew better now. Every time I saw her, it felt like there was a piece of me being ripped out. And every time I tried to ignore it, the ache grew stronger. Then, on the fourth night after that conversation, everything changed. I had been in my room, pacing, unable to focus on anything. I couldn't stop thinking about her, couldn't stop thinking about what she was doing, how she was coping with the same pain I was feeling. I had never wanted to hurt her, and now it felt like I was doing nothing but making it worse. I decided to confront her. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe an explanation, maybe some closure, or perhaps I was just hoping to see if, for a moment, she would look at me like she did before, like I was more than just a burden she had to take care of. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch, her eyes lost in a book. But she wasn't reading. Her eyes were distant, unfocused, as if she were a million miles away. When I stepped into the room, she didn't notice me at first. But then she lifted her eyes to mine, and I saw the flash of panic that crossed her face. She put the book down quickly and sat up straighter. "Hey," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The moment I spoke, I regretted it. My voice was too thin, too broken. "Hey," she replied softly, her voice trembling just slightly. It was clear that she was trying to act calm, but I could see through it. I could see the anxiety that rolled off her like a storm. I stood there for a long time, not knowing what to say, not knowing how to fix the mess we had made. Finally, I broke the silence. "We need to talk about what happened." She nodded slowly, her face pale. She didn't try to stop me, didn't ask me to leave. She just watched me, waiting, as if she already knew what was coming. "I can't stop thinking about it," I said, my words coming out faster than I intended. "About you, about us. I can't pretend this is normal. It's not. It's wrong. But I stopped myself. I didn't know how to finish the sentence. I didn't know what came after that. Didn't know how to fix the tangled mess that had become my life. But I knew I had to try. "I don't know how to stop. And I don't know if you want me to stop." She stood up suddenly, her face contorting with emotion. "You don't get it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't do this. I can't keep pretending. What we've done, what we've been doing, it's not just wrong. It's sick." Her words hit me like a slap. I wanted to scream at her, to say that I didn't want to feel this way, that I didn't want to have these feelings, but I couldn't. I couldn't deny it anymore. I was just as guilty as she was. I never meant to hurt you, she said, her voice softening, tears welling in her eyes. But you need to understand something. This can't go on. Not now, not ever. We have to stop before we ruin everything. I wanted to argue. I wanted to fight back, to tell her that we couldn't stop now, that the feelings between us were too real. But I couldn't. She was right. It was too late. We were both already ruined. I don't know how to live with this, I whispered. I don't know how to be normal again. She took a deep breath, wiping away a tear. I don't either, she whispered back. But we'll figure it out. We have to. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a solution. It was just a resignation, a surrender to the fact that there was no going back. We had crossed too many lines, and now all we had left was to face the consequences of our actions. As I turned and walked away from her that night, I knew that this was just the beginning of the unraveling. We had been living in a world of denial, pretending like everything was okay. But now the truth had caught up with us, and nothing would ever be the same again. I spent the following days in a daze, moving through the house like a ghost, not truly seeing anything around me. I couldn't focus on anything, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything other than the mess we had made. Every corner of the house seemed to echo with the silence between us, a silence that was now deafening. The house that had once felt warm and familiar now felt cold and distant. It was as though everything had changed overnight, and we were both left standing in the wreckage, unsure of how to rebuild or whether it was even possible to rebuild at all. We avoided each other. We spoke only when absolutely necessary, and even then, the words were thin, lacking the warmth we had once shared. It was as though the very act of speaking to one another was too painful, like each sentence we uttered dug deeper into the wound we had created. There was no comfort in silence, only the gnawing ache of regret and the crushing weight of the choices we had made. I couldn't escape the thoughts in my head, the gnawing feeling that something had been permanently broken inside of me. I kept replaying the moment when she had told me it had to stop, when she had said that what we'd done was wrong, sick even. I knew she was right, but I couldn't help but feel the injustice of it all. Why did it feel like the only person who truly understood me was the one person I could never have? It was all too much. I couldn't bear it anymore. One evening, I found myself standing outside her bedroom door, my hand hovering over the doorknob, my heart pounding in my chest. I hadn't planned to go in, but something inside me drove me forward, something that couldn't be reasoned with. I needed to see her, needed to hear her voice again, to feel the connection we once had, even if it was just for a moment. I pushed the door open slowly, trying not to make a sound, and found her sitting at her vanity, her back to the door. Her hair was down, cascading over her shoulders in waves, and she was staring at her reflection in the mirror. She didn't notice me at first, and for a moment, I just stood there, watching her, unable to tear myself away. She looked so fragile, so vulnerable. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting mine. She looked tired, exhausted, even, and the sadness in her gaze hit me like a punch to the gut. "I don't know," she said quietly, shaking her head. "I don't know how to be okay. Not after everything." I swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. I don't know how we got here. I don't know what to do anymore." Her gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the woman who had cared for me all these years, the woman who had been a mother to me, even though she wasn't my mother. But that woman, that image of her, was fading, slipping away like sand through my fingers. "I don't know how we got here either," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But I know one thing, we can't keep doing this. We can't keep pretending that everything is normal, that this, whatever this is, doesn't change everything." I nodded, but the words wouldn't come. I couldn't argue with her. I knew she was right, even though it felt like a betrayal to admit it. We couldn't keep living in this limbo, this impossible place where the bond between us was both undeniable and forbidden. She stood up then, taking a deep breath as she wiped away a tear that had fallen down her cheek. "I've been trying to protect you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I've only made it worse. I've hurt you more than I've helped you. Her words cut through me sharper than any knife. She was trying to protect me? I had never felt so lost, so abandoned in my entire life. She had been my rock, my only anchor, and now I was watching her unravel, piece by piece. "You didn't make it worse," I said, my voice breaking. "You didn't hurt me. I hurt myself. We hurt each other." The tears came then, unbidden, as I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of everything that had happened. The grief, the guilt, the loss. It all crashed over me like a wave, drowning me in a tide of raw emotion. She stepped closer to me, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch my face, her fingers brushing gently against my cheek. "I never meant to make you feel like this. I never wanted to cause you this pain." I closed my eyes at her touch, the warmth of her hand burning against my skin. I couldn't stop the flood of emotions that swelled inside me, a mix of desire, longing, and heartache. I wanted to pull away, to tell her that we needed to stop, that we couldn't do this anymore. But I couldn't. I didn't want to. I was trapped in a web of my own making, and I couldn't find a way out. "I don't know what to do," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to live without you." The words felt like poison on my tongue, but they were the truth, the raw, unfiltered truth that I had kept hidden for far too long. She looked at me for a long moment, her face unreadable, and then, slowly, she stepped back, her hand falling to her side. "We can't keep doing this," she said, her voice barely audible. "We can't keep pretending that we're not breaking, that we're not falling apart." And with that, she turned away from me, walking back to the vanity. I stood frozen, rooted to the spot, unable to move, unable to speak. I could feel the walls closing in on me, suffocating me in their weight. And just like that, it was over. The days blurred together in a haze of silence. The house felt colder, emptier, even though we were both still here. It was like we were living in parallel worlds, side by side, but unable to touch. Every room felt heavy, as though the walls were holding us captive in a space filled with regret, guilt, and confusion. The connection we once shared had been shattered, and now, we were left with the jagged remnants of what we destroyed. I couldn't look at her anymore without feeling like I was drowning. Her presence made my chest tighten, my heart ache, but it also made me want to reach out, to hold her again, even if that was the last thing I should do. Every time our paths crossed, I felt that familiar pull, that overwhelming longing, and every time, I was reminded that we could never go back to the way things were. I spent most of my time alone, retreating to my room where I could drown out the suffocating silence of the house. But even there, I wasn't safe. The guilt followed me, gnawing at me like a constant weight on my chest. I couldn't escape it. The shame, the remorse. It clung to me, suffocating every thought, every breath. And yet, despite all the pain, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Even now, when everything had fallen apart, she was still the one person I wanted, the one person who understood me, even though it was wrong. She was my mother's replacement, but she had become so much more. I couldn't deny it anymore. One evening, after days of avoiding each other, I found myself standing at her door again, my hand hovering over the doorknob, my heart pounding in my chest. It had been a week since we last spoke, a week of silence and distance, and I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to see her. I needed to hear her voice, to know if she was still there, still willing to try to fix the broken pieces of us. I knocked lightly on the door, not knowing what to expect. For a moment, there was no answer. Then, I heard her soft voice from inside. "Come in." I stepped inside, and my breath caught at the sight of her. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, her hair pulled back into a loose ponytail, wearing a simple sweater and jeans. She looked so much like the woman I had once known. Strong, caring, loving, but there was something different about her now. The light in her eyes had dimmed, and there was a weariness to her movements, like she had aged years in the span of a few days. She looked up at me when I entered, and for a brief moment, our eyes locked. Neither of us spoke. The silence between us was suffocating, thick with everything we had tried to bury. Finally, she broke the silence. You shouldn't be here. Her words hit me like a slap. She didn't even look angry. She just sounded tired. Tired of this, tired of me, tired of everything we had done. I'm sorry, I whispered, the words feeling inadequate in the face of everything we had lost. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make it right. She shook her head, her lips trembling. You can't fix it, she said softly, her voice breaking. It's broken. We're broken. I wanted to say something, to apologize, to tell her that I never wanted any of this to happen. But the words wouldn't come. What could I say? How could I explain that the feelings I had for her weren't something I could control? That the love I had felt for her, the need for her, had become something more than what it should have been? I never meant for any of this to happen, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. But it did. And now, we're both trapped in it. We can't undo it, and we can't go back to the way things were. It's too late for that. I took a step forward, my chest tight with emotion. I don't want to lose you, I said, my voice breaking. I don't want to let go, but I don't know how to live with this. I don't know how to move on. Her eyes filled with tears, and she wiped them away quickly, as though she were ashamed of her own weakness. I don't want to lose you either, she whispered. But we can't keep doing this. It's not healthy. It's not right. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not. We need to let go. We need to find a way to heal. Without each other. The finality in her words crushed me. The truth was painful, but it was the only truth we had left. There was no fixing this. There was no turning back. The bond we had shared was irreparable, and all we could do now was learn how to live with the consequences. I looked at her one last time, my heart aching with everything I wished I could change, everything I wished I could undo. But it was too late. I love you, I whispered, not as a confession, but as a final surrender. I always will, but I understand. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The weight of those words hung in the air between us, and I knew that saying them was the only thing I could do. I turned to leave, my hand on the doorknob, and just before I stepped out of the room, I heard her voice again. Goodbye, she said softly, and just like that, everything between us ended. Time passed in a blur, and the house felt more and more like a prison. Every corner echoed with the absence of what we had once shared, an emptiness that neither of us could fill. I kept thinking about how everything had fallen apart so quickly, how one wrong step had led to a cascade of consequences, each one more painful than the last. The bond between us that had once felt so strong had dissolved into nothingness, leaving only the cold remnants of what we had destroyed. I moved out of the house shortly after our final conversation. My father had returned home, unaware of everything that had transpired, and I couldn't bear to stay there anymore, not with her. The house was no longer a home to me. It was a constant reminder of everything I had lost. I found a small apartment in the city, trying to piece together the remnants of my life. I threw myself into my work, into anything that would distract me from the ache in my chest, from the memories that still lingered in every quiet moment. I tried to keep my mind occupied, but it was always there, the weight of what had happened, the feeling that I was living in the aftermath of something irreversible. But even in the solitude of my new apartment, I couldn't escape her. I couldn't escape the ghost of what we had been, and the truth that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I thought about calling her, writing her a letter, anything to bridge the distance between us, but I knew better. What was left to say? What could I say that would make things right, that would undo everything that had happened? The truth was, we were both broken, and there was nothing left to fix. In the quiet moments of the night, I would sometimes hear her voice in my mind, see the way her eyes looked at me before everything crumbled. But those memories were bittersweet now, tainted by the knowledge that we could never go back. I had always known that love was complicated, but I never realized just how much it could destroy. We had crossed lines we could never uncross, and now we had to live with the consequences. The guilt, the regret, the grief. It all stayed with me, like an old scar that would never fade. And yet, despite everything, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I couldn't stop feeling that pull, that ache deep inside me. It wasn't something I could walk away from, not easily. There was a part of me that still wanted her, still needed her, even though I knew it was impossible. But that's the nature of forbidden love. It never really lets go. It lingers even when you try to leave it behind. I couldn't undo the past, but I knew one thing for certain. I would never forget her. I would never forget what we had, even if it was a mistake. It was a part of me now, a part of my story that I couldn't erase. And maybe, just maybe, that's what made it so painful. The fact that it would always be there, lingering in the shadows, even when I tried to move on. And so, I'm left with this. An empty space where something beautiful once existed, now hollow and broken. I can't change what happened, but I can live with it. I can live with the regret and the knowledge that I was never truly free from the love I had for her. Closing. This is the story of a love that should never have been. A story that will haunt me for the rest of my life. But maybe, just maybe, it's a story that can help others understand the complexities of the heart. The way love can both heal and destroy, the way it can bind us to each other even when we know we should let go. If you've been following this journey, if you've been with me through every twist and turn, I want to hear from you. What do you think happened next? Do you think there's a way to move forward after something like this? Do you have any ideas for future stories that you'd like to see? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'm not done telling stories yet. There are more chapters to come, more tales of love, loss, and redemption. So, stay tuned, and be sure to subscribe for more. Let's continue this journey together. Until then, remember, you're never alone in your struggles, even if it feels like it. Keep coming back for more stories, and let me know what you'd like to hear next. Your thoughts mean the world to me.